Color Grading for Smarties 101. Today I'll be going over basic color theory, but in regards to someone who already does VFX, photography, and video editing. This video is technically to help out my friend Matthew Imagine, but I'm posting it publicly in case it helps out anybody else. First things first, the primary colors are technically not red, yellow, and blue. Say goodbye to Roy G. Biv and hello to CMY and RGB. Now, the world of color is both an art and a science. As in, there are things that we can study and measure, and then there are things that we feel and are influenced by culture. In the past, the primary colors were theorized to be red, yellow, and blue, and when you mix them together, in theory, you would get a black. Now, if you actually try this in real life with something like chalk, paint, dye, you might actually get more of a murky brown or a gray, but essentially all those colors are coming together and neutralizing. And when all the colors combined in the spectrum make black, that is called subtractive mixing or subtractive color. Most of us are used to working with subtractive color, and this is things like pigments, dyes, etc. And although this is a theory that is still holding up and being taught in various industries, it's not the most up-to-date theory. Currently, the most true primary colors are not blue, red, and yellow, but cyan, magenta, and yellow. And even though it's technically not correct, when I first learned about this, to rationalize it, I just told myself, oh, cyan is just a shifted blue, red is just a shifted magenta, and yellow is still yellow. So that might help you out if you need it. Okay, but they still teach red, yellow, and blue in schools, and the top makeup artists use red, yellow, and blue, and a lot of artists use red, yellow, and blue. This isn't saying that if you use red, yellow, and blue, you can't create art and amazing art. It's just saying that there are more optimal color choices, also align with the digital tools that we use. The spectrum is a representation of all the colors possible. A gamut is how much of that spectrum you can basically access through the primary colors that you've chosen. Stick with me now. So the gamut that you could get with red, yellow, and blue, the amount of colors that you can access within the entire spectrum is smaller than the gamut that you can get when you use cyan, magenta, and yellow as your primary colors. In short, if there are primary colors that allow you to get more access to more colors, that means they're actually the true primary colors compared to red, yellow, and blue. Moving on. So we talked about subtractive mixing, but that's not what we use when we're editing. Things get trickier when you talk about additive mixing or additive color. This is when you're dealing with light or the digital space. In subtractive mixing, the primary colors are cyan, magenta, and yellow, with the secondary colors being red, green, and blue. For additive mixing, you just flip those. So now your primary colors are red, green, and blue, RGB. Question, what happened to purple, pink, and orange? Do they not exist, or? Oh, they do. We're gonna keep it cute, we're gonna keep it simple, but in subtractive mixing, orange would be a tertiary color between yellow and magenta, and purple would be a tertiary color between magenta and cyan. And pink is such a broad term, but technically pink is when you add white to red, and that's a separate color than magenta. I know this is a lot, take a breather, rewatch if you have to, take a break, and come back. Going back to additive mixing, when we're working on editing, we're technically working in this fabricated, perfect world. So when we add all the colors together, we actually will get a white. And when we take away all the colors, we actually will get a black. However, this only works if you're using the proper primary colors. So remember when I said that color is both a science and an art, something that can be measured and something that is influenced by culture? This is where it's important to have an understanding of both the vibes and the facts when it comes to color. Let's go with the classic teal and orange color grading. Despite what many people say, teal and orange are not actually complementary colors. And the word complementary does not actually mean that two colors look well together. It means that when they are added together, they neutralize and make either black or white. However, I can still understand that people view them as complementary colors just like they do with red and green, blue and orange, and purple and yellow. And even I think that orange and teal can look very nice together. And this is just something that humans arbitrarily decided. But the most important part is understanding, how do we even make orange and teal? How do we transfer our image to match our vision? And once you have a basic understanding of color theory, you can simply rationalize without even looking up tutorials that an orange and teal color palette would heavily focus on cyan colors for the dark tones and orange colors for the lighter tones. And to get orange, you might be able to use a slider that involves an orange color or the orange hues. If you don't have that, you can increase the yellows and the magentas. And if you don't have that, you can work with reds and greens with an emphasis on reds. And speaking of the sliders and the tools that we have, you know how humans have receptors for red, green, and blue, which are coincidentally the primary colors. RGB CMY also explains the sliders and the tools that we have. Tint is the relationship between magenta and green. Temperature is the relationship between blue and yellow. And in between both of those is neutral or white. Okay, so where's the red and cyan option? That is a great question. In short, if you already have magenta, green, blue, and yellow, you can already use those to manipulate red and cyan. So it would be a redundant tool to have. Although personally, I would still like to have the tool. Understanding basic color theory is not only how you can improve your editing in terms of color correcting and color grading, but also how you can improve your VFX. Let's take my Gojo cosplay for example. I don't know much about 3D editing and fancy VFX, but I do know color. And so I essentially analyzed what was happening with the colors for his red technique, his blue technique, and his purple. And I just recreated the colors that I saw versus actually having the ability to create 3D assets, which one day I will be able to. When I'm cosplaying Gojo, I can't have white hair because I'm using my actual hair. So when I'm blonde, I will use some white hair colorant in real life to make my hair even whiter. And then in After Effects, I will analyze the environment that my hair is in, see what the dominant color is, and apply the opposite color. So often I'm adding blue to turn my yellowish hair closer to white. And this is on top of increasing the highlights, the midtones, and sometimes the blacks and shadows. But if I didn't know this, I might think, oh no, I can't add blue to this because it'll turn green. But no, blue and yellow are opposites, therefore they're neutralized to white. And this is why it's important to not only understand the general relationships of colors, but to think in terms of additive mixing. When you're doing your color correcting to prepare for color grading, it's important not only to know what your clips need to look like, but how to get there. Do things need to look warmer or cooler? Do things need to look more magenta or green? How are the blacks, whites, highlights, shadows, and midtones? Of course, having access and learning how to use the proper tools and software is going to be important, but even without that, eventually you'll start to see an image and be like, oh, I know how to get there, I can recreate that. And from there, really the only limitation you'll have is your experience and your creativity, which is also something I'm still working on. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them in a concise and non-confusing way.